Thank you, Brad, for doing this for us. I actually am very grateful that you have given us this opportunity to cover this and do this videography. With me, I have our Goswami, Hridayananda Das Goswami. He is also very famously known as Archarya Deva. So we will actually refer to him as Archarya Deva, as Maharaj has actually agreed. So what I did is I actually went around and asked a few people what sort of questions they will want me to ask Maharaj today. And I have quite a few. In fact, I had an influx of questions. So what I'll do is I will actually ask a few questions that I think we would actually really like to hear about. So my first question to you, Maharaj, is as we all know that you are one of the 11 gurus that were chosen by Srila Prabhupada, and he directly downloaded all the information to you. And how do you actually see the ISKCON at the moment, and what do you think Srila Prabhupada would think of this right now?
Of ISKCON?
Yeah.
Well, what would Prabhupada think of ISKCON right now? First of all, I have no doubt Prabhupada would deeply appreciate all the many excellent devotees who are serving him in ISKCON around the world. Mm-hmm. He would be grateful for that. He certainly would and does give them his blessings. Mm-hmm. And there's no question about that. At the same time, I think it's equally certain that Prabhupada would be extremely concerned about the condition of his Western mission. Prabhupada understood perfectly well that at the present time, history goes in many directions, but at least at the present time, the West is very prominent and is more or less establishing, whether it's in technology or science or even in many political trends, culturally, that the West is really leading at the present time. And that's why Prabhupada came to New York, precisely for that reason. And Prabhupada told me personally many times, and he said it even more times when I wasn't there, that if we could somehow establish Krishna consciousness powerfully in the West, that the world would take it. And so that was his global strategy. Oh. Of course, there have been many changes in ISKCON and many changes in the West. And to make a long story short, we have many very good devotees in the West. There are many intelligent, effective programs going on with many good devotees. At the same time, when you add it all up, it doesn't amount to, it's not good enough. We are not, I don't mean to say those devotees aren't good enough, but we need to do much more to make ISKCON, in a sense, what it was when Prabhupada was here and what he wanted it to be, a relevant, prominent, influential, spiritual movement in the Western world. And I'm sure Prabhupada would be profoundly concerned about that. And in fact, I think it would be his main concern.
Okay. So that actually answers my next question, which was, do you think ISKCON will continue to have the same influence to Westerners as it did initially? Just with the Westerners part, my understanding, coming from Fiji, I think Westerners is basically anyone outside India. But a lot of people think differently. How do you describe Westerners?
Well, first of all, it is a literal term. Yeah. Because West Europe and North America, even Australia, are west of the traditional cultural centers of the world, which were China, India, and the Mediterranean area, which includes, of course, the Middle East and the East Mediterranean, and then the Southern European countries. So for thousands of years, that was the cultural center of the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, then it changed. and I won't go into the whole history of the Age of Exploration, the discovery of the New World, and how the new commercial superhighway was no longer the Mediterranean. It was now, or the Silk Route. It became the Atlantic Ocean. And of course, we have the rise of the West and the age of colonization, and just so many historical things happened. So, in a real sense, the West is a literal geographic designation.
It is, okay.
Yeah, and so we can talk about Western countries, and we can speak about Westernized countries.
Yeah, okay.
And just like, in ancient history, you talk about the Hellenic world and the Hellenistic or Hellenized world, because Greek used to be English thousands of years ago. But there, for example, say you look at Russia.
Yeah.
Now, in many ways, Russia is Western. You could say architecturally, and well, I think mostly architecturally. But it's But if you know anything about contemporary history, anything at all, you know that Russia, at least through the leader they seem to be electing, has explicitly and powerfully defined itself as not the West. That's been the main point. The main point of the political and even you could say economic direction of Russia since the Putin era has been that we are not the West, we are an alternative to the West.
Okay.
And so, again, even though in Russia, people use computers and they play Western classical music, which they're very good at, and they have technology, so on the surface you could say, well, at least in many ways it looks like a Western country, but in terms of values, deep culture, for example, Russia sees the West as decadent. And to understand Russia's attitude, you have to understand the relationship of the Russian Orthodox Church to the Roman Empire and Constantinople. There's a whole history behind that. But Russia has explicitly defined itself proudly as not the West. And so, for example, Latin America is very Westernized. It's basically. Yeah. But however, I think being the West is not only having all the computers and the modern buildings and listening to the Beatles and all that. It's actually being cutting edge. So that, for example, Australia is very much a Western country in the sense that it is first world, and they're on the cutting edge of everything from medical research to political innovation. So it's being the West has something also to do with being the leading edge, the cutting edge, and not merely being an adopter or a consumer of Western culture, but actually being a creator of Western culture.
Yeah, okay.
And of course, Japan is an interesting case. It's kind of like sui generis in its own category. But so that's, I think, what I mean by West.
Yeah, no, that's great. I actually like that description, to be honest, because initially when somebody was I had some conversations previously, and I started realizing that my Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev Tamal Krishna Goswami, he actually came and preached in Fiji. Are we Westerners because we are out of India, although we look like Indians? And then we have native Fijians as well. Are they Westerners? So these are some of the things that started coming into my mind. And Srila Prabhupada actually went and installed Krishna Kalya himself in the temple in Fiji. So yeah, those are some of the questions that started coming in my mind. So thank you for explaining that. I really, really appreciate that. So I have another question, one of the many. This one is about why do you think so many scholars and academic people teach lofty topics on religion and are experts in their fields, and yet their hearts don't change and many remain faithless?
Well, it's interesting. I think if you look at the academic study of religion in the West and other places, but I know the West better. For a long time, you could say for centuries almost, one of the main purposes of the academic study of religion in the West was to deconstruct it, was to take it apart, and to show that it's mythological, and of course there's been a lot of pushback against that. So within the academy, within the field of the academic study of religion, there are many currents. There have been people that said that no, it's not our job to attack religion or to... I remember I had this debate with a sort of prominent professor of religion in the United States. Actually, he was the main professor of Tamal Krishna Goswami at Southern Methodist University. And he was defending the view, which I thought was absurd, with all due respect. He was defending the view that a scholar of religion must use methodological atheism.
I see.
And I was saying you should not use anything if you don't know it's true. And so, in other words, you should assume for the purpose of studying religion that claims about God or the soul are not true, because that will force you to look for sociological or psychological or historical causalities, and of course, which is absurd. So my point is that a scholar should just be neutral and just explain what it is. And of course you have the Marxist influence, that religion is, I explained that last night actually, that whole thing, And so there's been pushback against that, and there's a whole debate in academia over the insider-outsider perspective. Who really understands a religion? Is it the insider or the outsider? And of course, you can't see the forest for the trees, but then again, you can't see the trees for the forest. So, in a sense, so I think both the insider and the outsider have some special access to it, and it's really, I think, it's the cooperation between the insider and the outsider perspective. Like let's say I'm studying the Hare Krishna movement. On the one hand, my personal experience of the movement, my personal experience of Krishna and of Prabhupada is real. And therefore it'd be absurd to ignore all that or suppress it or deny it in the name of some fictitious, scholarship. At the same time, I found in my own life that it was helpful to sort of intellectually stand outside of ISKCON. I'm a member of ISKCON, but to sort of conceptually, and to say, how do we look to other people, and how do we look to scholars? And then I started to see things in ISKCON that I couldn't see before because I couldn't see the forest for the trees. So the fact that so many scholars, there are scholars at good universities who develop a real affection for religion they study, or belong to the religion they study. There are Jewish scholars of Judaism, Christian scholars of Christianity, certainly Muslim scholars of Islam, and Hindu scholars of Hinduism. But the history has been to use the study of religion to expose it as something non-scientific or non-objective. That's a big topic.
Sorry.
No, it's a good topic.
And I guess it's relevant, my next question is relevant to that, and it is why to this day Vaishnava scholars have not been able to convince the academic world of the authenticity of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The existence of Krishna has been like 5,000 years ago, and entire history, Vedic civilization as it is presented in our Shastra. This is from the famous Radhacharan in China.
Well, first of all, it's like saying if you go to an electronics store, why can't you buy a good tomato? It's just that's not what scholars do. The academic world is not a world to be conquered, colonized by ISKCON, and turned into a preaching mission. It's simply meant to give, as far as possible, objective information, let's say in the field of religion, about religions. And so it's not always obvious what the real truth is. Even, for example, in ISKCON or any religious organization, sometimes there are disputes or debates or disagreements. And so finding, as far as possible, what the objective truth of a matter is in a religion, it may take some scholarship. You may have to understand. For example, some people say that dressing a certain way is Vedic culture, and wearing dhotis and saris, as you know.
Yeah.
There never was a time in Indian history when a woman who wore a sari was therefore a Vaishnavi. Many Vaishnavis wore saris, but it's not that if you were, in say in Indian history, if you wore a sari, then you're a Vaishnavi. If you wear a dhoti, then you're in a Muslim shirt, kurta. Therefore, you are a Vaishnava.
Yeah.
And so scholarship can be good. I mean, even within ISKCON. I mean, let's start within ISKCON. There's and Tamal Krishna Goswami is working on this. It's a task to try to come to an objective understanding of what our culture is, so that we're presenting to the world a true spiritual science and not simply a mythological history, in the sense that talking about a Vedic culture as if it was an eternal ethnic tradition. So, yeah, the academia, that's not what they do. Academia isn't and cannot be, at this point in history, a religious institution. It's a scholarly institution, and the best we can hope for, and what we often do get, is simply neutrality.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the scholarship that they do helps us to understand more objectively our own tradition.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense now. Another question for me over here is, for someone who wishes to follow your footsteps and perhaps wishes to do something similar to what you're doing, how would you advise them to go about doing that, Maharaj?
I can't make faces because he's filming. So, I'm just trying to help Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Prabhupada's a great soul. He came to this world. He started this movement. He was a pure soul. He had a powerful vision, a dream that we need to establish Krishna consciousness, especially in the Western world, because then the rest of the world would automatically take it. It's just practical. And so I just want to help him to do that. And so if someone can join this effort and help us to help Prabhupada, that will be very much appreciated.
There you go. That's a good one. We may have actually covered this one, but I'll just ask anyway. For regular working professionals out there, and someone like me who just go to do an 8 to 5 job every day, you have kids at home to look after, a husband, and everything else as a lady, or any other being. What are the kinds, there are kinds of stresses, like what are the kinds of stresses you see in these kind of people, and what would your advice be to them?
Well, the stress of modern life, especially for a working mother whose time is split like that, this is across the board. It doesn't really matter what religion you're in.
Yeah.
Interestingly, social science has found that when men and women are asked what, in terms of your private life, your family, in terms of your profession, what would your ideal life look like? What they find with women is that 20% of women want to be really just career-centered. They really just want to do their career. 20% of women prefer not to have a career and just be with their family. And 60% of women, approximately, would like to have a balance. They would like to have maybe work part-time, have some kind of income, but at the same time have a lot of time with their family, their children, and so on. When they ask men the same question, it turns out that 70% of men are just
career-oriented.
Yeah, just want to focus on their career. So 80% of women don't want to do that, and 70% of men do want to do that. And so Yet the modern world is a struggle.
Yeah.
And so, as we know in pre-industrial societies, almost everybody worked at home. You know, a man might go out to plow his fields or to do whatever he did to work his craft, but it was in his little village. And so children could practically see their parents all day. And parents could see their children all day. And so this industrial and post-industrial society is very stressful and artificial in many ways. And so I think the best one can do is to find a sustainable balance.
Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to also thank Guru Maharaj, Archarya Deva, for actually spending so much time with us and giving so much of his time to have this completed today. I'm sure everybody will be excited to watch this. So we will be actually publishing this out on our Hare Krishna Melbourne website. And this will also be published on PTV Melbourne YouTube channel. So yeah, watch this space. Thank you so much.
I'd like to very sincerely thank PTV Melbourne, I'm trying to pronounce it properly, and especially Pradeep, who was very kind to come here and film all this, and so we're grateful to all of you.